Really, I need to write a book that's just called How to Not Make Everything My Job. Because if I get momentum, I'm like, oh, I'll turn it into my job. And then I will have to make money at it. Keeping something unattached to my job, to my work, has just been so, so important to me.
Welcome, friends. In this episode of Insights at the Edge, my guest is Cody Cook-Parrott. Cody is a writer, artist, and movement practitioner who builds simple structures that help artists make work. Cody writes a weekly newsletter, hosts the podcast Common Shapes, and facilitates a weekly writing group called Landscapes. They're the author of several books, including How to Not Always Be Working, Getting to Center, and a new book that I'm proud to say is from Sounds True. It's called The Practice of Attention, Cultivating Presence in a Distracted World. Cody, welcome.
Thanks so much, Tami. So happy to be here.
Tell me how you came to write a book on the practice of attention.
Gosh, through Instagram addiction, really, just through, to put it really bluntly, I used Instagram for many years and just found myself and found my community of artists really addicted to it and having their attention really fractured by it. So this feeling of I can't sit down to write for long periods of time, or I can't record my album and focus the way I want to, right? I was seeing artists really lose their focus. And so through my own journey of making the decision to leave Instagram, which sort of happened through the process of writing this book, actually, The Practice of Attention, really all kind of began with, looking at it through this kind of recovery and addiction space.
Obviously, being on the internet, using social media has been an important part of your career. How do you balance the negatives, the fragmentation part, with all the positives you've gained? And how do you come to that special alchemy for yourself?
I love that word, alchemy. I feel like, something I often say is I'm not anti-technology. I love being online. I love the internet. I love emailing. I love finding interesting articles to read. I love listening to audiobooks. I love making playlists, but for me, social media just really became kind of too overwhelming to find that alchemy, to find that like happy medium place. But for people who aren't wanting to leave social media completely, I talk about this in the book. I think a lot about digital detoxes, taking breaks, taking a break for a week, taking a break for a month, even just trying a day or a few hours, having these little breaks so that we can sort of attune ourselves back to our creative work and practices. So breaks are a really big way for me, whether it's, you mentioned my book, How to Not Always Be Working. Even though I'm not using social media, workaholism is really easy for me to slip into. So turning off the computer, as I've been talking about this book a lot, I keep reminding people that our phones and computers have off buttons. And so we can, really power down so that we can really tune in to the self.
Well, it's interesting that you brought up workaholism right here in the beginning of our conversation. It's part of what made me personally very interested in your book, The Practice of Attention. You talked at one point about the importance of a hobby and having hobbies, many hobbies, not just one, but you can tell from my perspective as a historic workaholic, even having one hobby seemed like I didn't have room for it in my life for the longest time. So I want to ask you some questions. How do you discern the difference between workaholism and I love my work, I'm really passionate about it, I'm into it, it's serving a lot of people, it's really fulfilling, leave me alone and let me work, please?
I feel like I've been lucky to have a lot of amazing partnerships in my life, both romantic and platonic, and I can only speak to right now, but when my partner says to me, we're not having enough time together, or we haven't been on a date in months, or, it's not like fun to hang out with you. And I look into her beautiful eyes and I'm like, how can I deny this beautiful woman, my sense of self, and I think that's often what comes to me is my friendships, my girlfriend, my parents. I'm lucky to have parents really involved in my life and they only live 2 hours away. So when it's been a couple months that I haven't seen them, that's usually like an indicator to me. If I haven't called my little brother in a while, that's an indicator to me. Like I kind of have these little indicators that are from the people I love. And when the people I love say to me, Cody, I'm not seeing enough of you, that's usually a sign to me that I've slipped into workaholism. Because even if I'm not working all the time, I might be thinking about work all the time and then letting that anxiety stop me from traveling or picking up the phone. So definitely surrounding myself with loved ones who feel comfortable being very honest with me.
That's a great answer. Now, I mentioned this thing about hobbies, and I just want to make sure that that comes out as a complete communication because it's strong in the way you write about it in the practice of attention, that it's not you're not accruing greater economic reward necessarily from your hobby. And it may not even be something that's directly in service of people. You're just having fun doing this, whatever goofy thing you like to do. And don't we have time for that?
Hobbies, out of everything in the book, hobbies, I will be honest, is still the thing I am the most haunted by, troubled by, the thing that I'm like always truly dedicated to trying to figure out is how to not it really I need to write a book that's just called How to Not Make Everything My Job, because I get passionate about something, and I think this is maybe has to do with having ADHD, but it can be easy for me to lose momentum. And so if I get momentum, I'm like, oh, I'll turn it into my job. And then I will have to make money at it. And then I will have to keep doing it. So for me, keeping something unattached to my job, to my work, has just been so important to me. I just recently there's a beautiful little horse ranch right around the corner from our house, and they help rehabilitate horses and also hang out with kids in the area who have autism or developmental disabilities. And those kids get to just like walk around with the horses. So it's like the horses need friends, the friends need horses. It's this really beautiful place, and they need help with their newsletter. And so I was like, oh, I love making newsletters, and I can, it was sort of like, oh, how can I do this thing that isn't my job, but is connected to my job and my passion, but do have it be in service to someone else. So yeah. And then I get to walk the horses, and that part's just really fun.
In the practice of attention, you share about how you recovered from alcohol addiction north of 14 years ago. And you draw some parallels in your own discovery about addiction to social media and alcohol addiction and what that process was like for you. And sometimes this can get a little blurry for me when we're we're talking about workaholism. Now we're talking about addiction to technology. And so I'm curious how you view it all, and especially as it pertains to our attention.
Yeah. This is the thing about addiction or attention is, and, coming back to that word alchemy and trying to figure out, can I use this thing in moderation is the question I'm usually asking myself. So, for instance, food, shopping, sex, those are all things that I have had to sometimes put little bumpers on, like when you're bowling, the little, like, make sure my ball doesn't fall into the gutter. And some of that is just bringing in my attention to be like, okay, I want to spend only on these things in the next couple months, or I want to really focus my eating in this way so that I'm not swinging on the pendulum to overeating or undereating or over earning or under earning, all these different kind of whack-a-mole, I call it, in addiction. And so I think when I bring my attention to the matter at hand, I have an easier time kind of understanding, do I need to step away from this completely or not? And, staying sober for almost 15 years has not been easy, but sometimes I joke it's the easiest choice I make every day because I just have none. I don't try to moderate how much alcohol I put in my body, and my relationship to social media really mirrored alcohol in that way, that I was trying to moderate how much I was putting into my psyche, and I just could not moderate it. So I chose the zero route, which has some grief in it. It's not, I wish I could find a beautiful, healthy relationship with social media. That sounds great. But I just personally couldn't.
Do you think that might change in time, that there'll be some, more balanced, if that, I don't know if that's quite the right word, but something like that?
Yeah, I have been wondering that. It's been really interesting being on my little promotional tour of podcasts for this book, and I really feel the weight of not having social media. I've never had a book come out and not had social media. And it feels a little tricky because there's been part of me that's like, do I get an account again? But so much of the book is about not using it. And so it feels a little, yeah, I'm in a dance right now with it where I am sort of asking myself, could I have it? Could I have a virtual assistant keep the account up and I wouldn't even touch it? I think I maybe wish I would have kept my old account up as an archive, and I decided not to do that. I did decide to delete it completely. So yeah, I don't think my journey is done. I think I'm still asking questions and still staying curious about it.
Some of what I really love about your approach to talking about these topics is encapsulated in the values that you post on your website about the work that you
Mm.
do. And I wanted to talk about a few of them. Even as we're talking now, structure with softness. And I was like, okay, if I'm going to find a more disciplined approach to my own creative art making, I like that. I like the structure with softness. So tell me more what you mean by that.
Yeah, something that I am always thinking about with discipline is, how do I weave in devotion? And so to me, sometimes I love doing morning pages from Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way. And one soft structure for me is, it's okay if they're afternoon pages. It's okay if they're nighttime pages. Don't tell Julia, she's like, in the morning. Or it's okay if they're 2 pages instead of 3. It's like, those are kind of my example of soft structures are, how can I offer myself a little more gentleness, a little more grace, and have my devotional activities that I do often every day, but let them be at different times, let myself off the hook if it's like the few days before my period, maybe I'm not as hard on myself, kind of these different reasons or ways. But also, that's the dance of like, I also don't want to make too many excuses for myself because I really want to stay devoted to the activities that bring me the most creative joy and pleasure.
Devotion is such a beautiful word. Tell me more what you mean by it.
Yeah, to me, devotion is a really spiritual action word, and it means what do I believe in or have hope for or have hope in? And as much as I love hope, I also love Pema Chodron's idea of hopelessness and this idea of, stripping away hope and just being left bare with what is. And so to me, devotion is sort of that dance and song of how do I move towards what I hope to see in the world and am sort of turning over to my higher power and surrendering my whole life through usually journaling, walking, movement. Those are my most devotional acts. So, yeah, devotion I feel is just the gentle entrance to understanding the self a little better.
You mentioned your own ADHD, and I wasn't aware of that before our conversation, but having a mind that is not neurocompliant, that's the way I talk about
I
myself.
like that.
I liked, I think, particularly the structure with softness, because sometimes when things are very rigidly explained to me as like, here's your, book for creating new habits, I think that's never going to work for me. But at the same time, I do need a little more structure to help me. And one of the things I was moved by is how you mentioned the Pomodoro technique. I'm not sure if I'm
Mm,
saying that correctly,
mm,
was
mm.
extraordinarily helpful to you in your writing. And I wonder if you can share with people how you used that technique, what it is and how you used it.
Yeah, I live in northern Michigan and there's a really rich community of elders here who are writers and artists. And a friend who's written many novels said to me, well, I had said to her, I'm really struggling to write my book. I'm struggling to like sit down and write it. And she said, well, what are you doing from 5 to 7 a.m. every day? And I was like, sleeping? And she was like, well, what if you use that time to write the book? And so I started doing that as a practice, and that is how I wrote this book, was mostly from 5 to 7 a.m. for a few months. And but as I started doing it, there was still something left to unlock. And I worked with Dr. Kate Henry, who is an amazing productivity coach, but she really approaches productivity from a slow, neurodivergent, queer perspective. And she was who set me up with the Pomodoro method, which was to write for 25 minutes, take a 5-minute break, and then write for another 25 minutes and do that a couple times. And it just brought so much joy to my writing. It made me love writing again. Like I loved taking my little 5-minute breaks to have a snack, peel an orange, let the dog outside, fill up my coffee again, look at my phone for a second, just like get these little dopamine moments and then go back in. And it really, I really think that the practice of attention is my strongest book that I've ever written. And I think part of that is from writing in that way.
One of my favorite quotes, attention is in and of itself a creative act. That was one of my favorite quotes from the book because what it did was it made me start looking at everything because I guess a lot of the way I pay attention is through the visual function, but also listening and seeing the creativity that I'm bringing to the act of perception. Attention is in and of itself a creative factor. Anyway, I just want to just say that. Beautiful, beautiful line. Okay, I want to mention two other guiding values that you list on your website that really got my attention. Agency over urgency. Tell me how you came up with that.
That, I have to give credit to, that was, I worked with a copywriter on my website, Nicole Cloutier, and Nicole pulled that out of a bunch of like free writing that I did. Like I just kind of wrote all the different words that I felt like were a part of my values. And that was one that she really pointed at and was like, agency over urgency. Like you are giving most of my students, members of my writing group, are queer, neurodivergent, trans, BIPOC, weirdos, freaks. Like definitely we are the outsiders. And I think one of my gifts is to really build spaces where I give people permission to just be themselves and have agency over their work and their life, and to do it outside of capitalism just a little bit so that we're not running on urgency.
I didn't know that about you, Cody, in terms of the audience that you've magnetized as your students and in your online classes. I wasn't aware of that. But it does inspire me to bring forward that one of the things I notice that makes my own creative expression challenging is that I feel so weird. I'm just, I'm just like, really, when it all comes out, it's just going to be, this is a glittering rainbow of not previously seen strings of words that I feel afraid to put out there. So I wonder if you could address that directly in terms of the audience you're working with and how you help people with that.
Well, first of all, I just think you're so cool, Tami.
Thank you.
I think you're welcome. But I mean, most people that I think are really cool are really weird. So I'm not saying you're not weird,
No,
but
right, yeah.
I think I think that I just express myself with such abandon, that I think it shows other people in the room like, oh, I can run a business and I don't have to like, for lack of a better word, like wear a suit and tie, or I can run a business as, I think business up until not that long ago, especially like business books or books that talked about self-employment, were just written by men, and specifically like white, cis, straight men. And so I think I forget sometimes that we're carving out space as business owners in a really different way. And we don't get to see that all that much. And so, yeah, I think that's what I would tell someone, though, who feels that, is just that, I mean, it's a little hippy dippy manifestation, but it's just like, trust that you will attract the right people. Like start your project as weird as it feels or as odd as it seems, and just trust that the right people will come into your space.
You write that one of your core principles is a type of anti-perfectionism. That this. Tell me more about that and how you help people with that.
Yeah, gosh, I think mostly about, so in the beginning of the pandemic, for the first like 2020 to 2023, I taught a very popular quilting class called A Quilt is Something Human. And it was a 4-week class on Zoom. And it was how to make a quilt in a month. And the last session of the 4 was show and tell. And I really, as a dancer and as a quilter, anti-perfectionism is just a huge part of improvising for me, of spontaneous choice making and just really being alive with throwing an arm out and being like, oh, that wasn't the right move. And then, twisting back to the other side or cutting a piece of fabric and being like, oh, that was weird. And then cutting it in half again and seeing what happens. And, in a quilt is something human. The most beautiful thing is when a student comes to that first week and they introduce themselves and they're really nervous, they're in a group of new people and they're like, I don't know how to quilt, but I really want to try. And then at show and tell, they just have this amazing quilt that they've created or multiple quilts that they've created. And I find so much joy in teaching anti-perfectionism through quilt making specifically and showing people how you can design something and then literally just cut it into pieces and rearrange it and sew it into something else.
It makes a lot of sense to me, and it seems sort of intuitively obvious when you talk about it in terms of quilting. And I can also imagine it very easily in terms of dancing because, move that body. Okay, there's no such thing, How do you apply that in your writing?
I think really one of my favorite writers and best friends and sounds true authors is the poet Jacqueline Susskind. And Jacqueline, has this beautiful book, Every Day is a Poem. And I think so much Jacqueline to me is the quintessential improviser as a writer. She had this project for years called Poem Store. She's written tens of thousands of poems on her typewriter. Someone says a word to her and she writes them a poem. And you can't delete, you can't backspace. So there's this, I look at that practice of writing of anti-perfectionism and improvising as so beautiful because it also takes great acceptance. Because Jacqueline doesn't chase somebody down at the farmer's market and say, oh gosh, I have to redo the last line. She hands them that, poem and that's it. And in my own writing, it was beautiful to have a beautiful editing process with this book. I loved my team at Sounds True so much. I feel really grateful. But at the same time, a lot of the writing that really remained in the book was my kind of first draft of those strong sentences that remained, and they got rearranged in some ways. But yeah, I feel like some of anti-perfectionism and improvising is accepting the thing might stay and we might not rearrange it. So
the book had a fabulous first sentence, and I love it when books have strong first sentences. Here's your first sentence. One might assume that a book about attention should be written by someone who studies attention, but I argue it should be written by someone who studies art.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah. You go. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like there's this, especially in kind of like self-help nonfiction world, there is this pressure on books to be sort of scientific or to be like, show me the data, which I love. I love those books. I'm a reader of books like those, but I think that sentence was almost me giving myself permission to write a book without a lot of data. I was like, I could try to like research and get the science behind all of this, but I think I just want to write from my experience and from the experience of being an artist and the experience I see other artists searching through in their own mediums.
One more of your guiding values that I liked: consistency over intensity. Ooh, now that's interesting because, you appear to be quite an intense person, and yet here you are, consistency over intensity.
Yeah, that's some what's the word? Advice I need to take myself, I think, probably. But to me, that one is really about how can I do a little thing each day instead of, kind of like 25 minutes here, 25 minutes there, instead of like, I have to write for 8 hours, which can work sometimes for me. I can flow for that long, but I did a project for many years called Personal Practice, where I made a dance video every day for a year, and they were 15 seconds long. It was just, I didn't make like an evening length ballet that year, but I made these little snippets of movement, every day. And so I don't necessarily think we have to do things daily, but I do love a container for daily practice. It really helps me.
You mention in the book that if you get nothing else out of this book, and so I always pay special attention whenever I see a
Okay.
sentence like that. I'm like, okay, Tami, you've been kind of snoozing a bit here for the last, pages or paragraphs. Take the
Yeah.
pen out. Do the attention audit. Please do the attention audit. Here's how you do it. So go ahead, tell our listeners how to approach an attention audit.
Yes. The attention audit. I also want to shout out, if you pre-order the book or just order the book, if it's whenever you're listening, and you go to thepracticeofattention.com, you can put in your receipt, and a bonus is you get the attention audit workbook. So you get a free little workbook that goes with the book, and it's fun to do. But the attention audit, it really sort of was born out of my own experience doing 12-step inventories. So either bigger ones or even just daily little inventories of like, where am I letting my higher power in? Where am I ignoring my higher power? How can I loosen up a little bit? Where do I need to tighten up a little bit? And the attention audit is really for anyone who wants to spend less time on their phone, on social media, with tech, or with just anything, whatever your thing is that you feel like it's consuming you more than you would like. Could be watching Netflix, or, maybe you're reading, I don't know. There's nothing you could read too much of. I was going to say romance novels, but honestly, it sounds great. So maybe there's just something that you're like, I wish I was doing this instead of this with my time. The attention audit helps you really track your time, track your energy, because I think it's so easy to be like, oh, well, I don't have time to have a hobby. Well, it's like, how much time are you spending on your phone, or how much time are you spending, watching episodes of Grey's Anatomy, asking for a friend? So things like that.
Okay, but tell me more. How, like, just I'm not going to get the workbook. I'm listening. I'm driving
Yep.
in my car. How do I
Yep.
how do I bring my attention to how I'm spending it?
I love that. So I think bringing your attention to how you're spending it is opening up your awareness, like opening up your awareness field and just noticing. So, something I talk a lot about in the book is turning the dial up even 1%. So, even if it's 1% more of a noticing practice of like, oh, I'm noticing that I wish I was listening to more audiobooks. I'm listening to the radio again in the car. I could turn on an audiobook even for my 20-minute drive. So just starting to very subtly notice, how are you spending your time? And then when you're not in the car listening, if you have that little extra momentum, to grab a pen and paper and write down your morning, your afternoon, and your evening. So how did you spend your time in those three sort of sections, and how might you want to change it?
One of your confessional moments towards the beginning of the practice of attention had to do with the fact that you write about how you didn't pay your taxes for 7 years.
Sure.
And how there was this underground sense, this is my language, I'm not exactly sure how you described it, but where you didn't feel like you were in your own integrity, and that was
Mm.
part of what was driving the fragmentation of attention, because you didn't really want to be with yourself, because then what would come up was, well, when was the last time you communicated with the IRS or whatever it was, whatever the thing was. And
Yeah.
I think this is a really important point to talk about, which is how do we get down into the root system of what's driving our fragmentation? Like, what is it that we're so uncomfortable that we're reaching for the XYZ? What's driving it? So I wonder if you can say more about that and your process of resolving that.
Yeah, I love the line, I'm sick and I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I think a lot of people use that when they're just ready to give something up or give up struggling, give up digging, right? When you hit the bottom and you're ready to climb up. And that's really, how it was for me with the taxes was I was just kind of sick and tired of being sick and tired and really just wanted to feel free. I mean, I don't like paying my taxes, even though I do try to pay my taxes gladly and with gratitude. But, it feels so much better, like the last couple years now, I've paid my quarterly taxes on time. I've set enough aside for them. I haven't taken them from myself. And that is huge after 7 years of, basically stealing from myself and then going into a huge amount of debt with the IRS and frankly living outside my means. And so, yeah, it's something that we talk a lot about in a lot of the groups that I host is just either getting a bookkeeper or setting up your books really early and, having an accountant or having a CPA and getting clear with the numbers, because that has just been a huge part of my pain and my story is, I still slip into moments where I'll take on more debt or I won't be totally solvent. And it really, that's another like attention moment for me where if my money is out of sync, I know that I've made a misstep somewhere.
How do you help people track what it is under the surface that is driving their desire to distract in one way or another? Like, I am going to do the Netflix binge and all these other things because something's driving me that I don't want to look at it.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that you said the root system and the question I generally ask someone if I'm having a one-on-one session with them or their friends who have looked through the book already is, what are you avoiding? What are you avoiding feeling? And usually we can track that to maybe an action that isn't getting done, like the taxes. Or it's like, okay, if you're avoiding feeling lonely, are you spending too much time out with friends? Are you not spending enough time in solitude? Usually there's an action that we can sort of go with, what are you avoiding? But it's really kind of that simple as asking that question and seeing what comes through.
In this area of inquiry, you write about building our discomfort capacity. And I thought,
Mm.
this is really good. This is really good because I think a lot of people are so uh, uncomfortable, have a lot of discomfort about all kinds of things. What's happening in the world, what's happening in their neighborhood, what's happening in their heart, what's happening in their relationships,
Mm.
inside things, outside things, all kinds of things. How have you built your discomfort capacity?
Yeah, I think there's my discomfort capacity definitely comes from I'm not a huge sitting meditation person, but I'm a big walking meditation person and movement meditation. And, when anybody asks me what my favorite book is, it's absolutely When Things Fall Apart by Pema Chodron. And, I love that it's called When Things Fall Apart, not If. And, that has just the practices in that book have really stuck with me in terms of like letting go of what other people think of me, like, and, really something she talks about so much in her work is like using the breath specifically, but like turning toward the discomfort. So instead of trying to get rid of it, to be like, okay, let's say I'm really uncomfortable that I haven't paid my taxes. So I'm going to breathe in that discomfort for everyone who is so uncomfortable that they haven't paid their taxes. And then I'm going to breathe out relief for all of us. And I'm not remembering what that practice is called, but that's one of my favorites. And so I feel like I've just picked up little tools along the way from some of my favorite books or authors, and that help me sit in the discomfort. And yeah, I think it's like also being comfortable being uncomfortable is a muscle a little bit. Like it's another practice. Like you just have to kind of practice it a couple times and it gets less hard.
Yeah, the Pema Chodron practice is from Tibetan Buddhism. It's called Tonglen, just to fill that
Thank you.
in for you.
I know
It's
you know.
fine. It's all right.
Yes.
And it's literally, it means sending out and receiving. So you're sending out
Yes.
the relief
Mm,
and taking in the pain of all of yourself and all the people. So
yes.
it's taking in and then receiving and then sending. Okay. You, though, bring up this practice that I had never heard of before that I thought was cool. And it has to do with the car metaphor,
Oh, the emotional
the
car.
emotional car. And I thought, that's so good. I really like that. So share with people what the emotional car is.
Yeah, the emotional car is an idea I've heard a few my own former therapist and other therapist friends talk about. And it's basically it's sort of it reminds me of parts work in some ways, but it's basically when a part of you is really frustrated or screaming and crying and kicking and doesn't want to go on the ride of life, instead of sticking them in the trunk, you can put them in the passenger seat or in the back seat of the car and say, come along for the ride. You can talk to me about it on the drive, but you can't drive the car and you can't touch the radio. So it's, that's sort of the metaphor is like I want to bring all of the parts of me along, but it's often like 9-year-old Cody is a part that I really work with a lot. And 9-year-old Cody kind of wants to run the show, really wants to protect me. And I want to like stick them in the trunk. I'm like, shut up. Like, just let me do this. But it's like they really need to be heard. So we put them in the back seat and then they can kind of talk to me about what's going on, but not they don't get to drive. They're only 9.
What I think is great in terms of how you talk about these practices and kind of clearing out our own root system is in terms of being a creator, a maker, having access to high quality attention yourself, that there's a way. This is what I got from reading the practice of attention in this regard, was sort of like you have to be a clean machine in order for this all to come through you. Like if you got a bunch of parts that are stuck in the trunk and you're going to keep the trunk totally
Mm.
locked down, and then you find yourself over time feeling under a stranglehold of some kind, unable to voice. Well, it's because I'm mixing a lot of metaphors here, but there's all this stuff pushed down that has you all clogged up.
Yeah, I like clean machine. I think the thing that's coming to me when you just sort of painted that picture is kind of circling all the way back to having friends and colleagues and peers and those relationships that can help you unclog. Like I think of so many people in my life so many books, friends, people, documentaries that, awoke something in me and helped me. I'm picturing one of those little cleaners that you clean a straw out with or something, they kind of like unclog the pipes. So yeah, just another shout out for the importance of friends and community.
Speaking of that, you're gifted at a lot of things, Cody, but one of them is bringing people together online. And so unlike a social media feed where it's just out there for you to compare yourself to other people, you're bringing people together in creative ways. And I wonder if you can talk about that, the landscapes work you're doing and other ways you bring people online together.
Yeah, I have a writing group called Landscapes, and I also have another co-working group that's running right now called Flexible Office, which is a little more focused on admin work and a little more cross-disciplinary. And then I teach writing classes and quilting classes and a lot of creative business classes. But honestly, my co-working spaces are maybe my favorite. They're really low pressure. Everyone is really encouraged to show up exactly as they are that day. Some people show up and are literally working on their second novel. Other people show up and barely can put the toast in the toaster. It's like everybody is operating at different capacities, but we're all cheering each other on, and there's no wrong way to do it. And, you know, it's a lot better than social media. It's just real connection. I mean, I've also watched so many people in my co-working spaces become friends and unclogging build those unclogging techniques together as a group. Or, they invite each other to be on each other's podcasts or meet up in person. And it's when I taught a dance and writing intensive in Western Mass last year, and like 7 members of Landscapes came, and it was just so amazing, like to meet them in person, and how sweet it was to see them like meeting each other for the first time. And yeah, there's kind of nothing like it. It's really my favorite place to be on the internet. So
When you said, some people, and then you finished and said, are working on a novel, and some people are,
mhm.
I thought you were going to say some people come in their pajamas, and some people, I thought you
Oh,
were.
definitely. People are definitely. Today was the first day of this season of Flexible Office, and multiple people. I was in my pajamas. I did put hard pants on for this interview, but I was like, yeah, I was definitely in my pajamas at Flexible Office. So
Your first company, at least that I heard about, was called Have Company.
yes,
Pretty funny name. How
yeah.
how do you bring your entrepreneurism and your artistic nature together without feeling a conflict? Like, oh, now I got to turn this into something that's going to make money. And I have to like, for
Mm,
example, you very naturally promoted your book and said, come to my website and you can, when you buy the book, you can. I thought, wow, good, as your publisher. I was like, go Cody, great job. And it's not easy sometimes, but so to bring it all into and some people are like, oh, that's in conflict. I'm never going to be selling and
yeah.
separate these things, but you're creatively bringing it together, as am I, but I'm interested in how you see it.
Yeah, just to bring it back really quick, and then
Yeah.
I will answer this question. But Have Company is, have you ever seen Woody Guthrie's New Year's rule-ins? And he has like all these beautiful New Year's resolutions. Well, you should look it up sometime. But one of them is have company, but don't waste time. So I'm clearly always been thinking about this attention and time. And so that's where have company comes from. There's a lot of good ones. One is keep hoping machine running. They're all they're all little mini poems, but yeah, Woody Guthrie's New Year's rule-ins. You know, business as creative practice is a huge value of mine. Is being an entrepreneur, being a business owner is fun to me.
Oh
It's
yeah. I
it's
say it's
it's
a contact sport. That's what I say to people.
yes,
It is a
yes, it's a
contact
contact
sport,
order. Oh my God. I love that. And yeah, I was thinking about I've been thinking about, as this book comes out, I've this question of like, what is the role of the artist who is also a business owner? My friend Amelia Hruby says, are you a business owner, an artist, or a secret third thing? Which the secret third thing is sort of this combination of all of it. And I think I think some of it is, I had my first art show in a gallery this past year after, being an artist since I was a child, and I'm 37 now. And it felt amazing to just it was of quilts, and it felt amazing to just have quilts up on the wall and in a gallery with my name on it. And but as an entrepreneur, I had programming. I had quilt camp where 10 people came from all over the country to quilt together. I made a catalog. I did a raffle quilt for like an abolish ice raffle. And it's like I had to have all of the I and it isn't necessarily, I mean, it's not like I made a bunch of money doing any of that, but it's like that's the entrepreneurial spirit that I just have, is like I want it to be multifaceted and speak to many layers of the artistic process. But in terms of, I mean, I don't, I wish, I'm trying to find a great answer for the like how to not turn it all back into workaholism. But it's like, I always am thinking about what's the next great business idea I can have. Or, oh, well, I have a roadside stand that is up by my house right now. But once the snow melts, the nice Amish people are going to bring it back down to the road. And so that's my next business. It will be the roadside stand project. It doesn't have a name yet, but I'm close.
It sounds like your entrepreneurial ideas are another expression of your multifaceted creativity. I mean, we've talked about movement and quilt making, and I mean, you got a lot going on here of an experimental nature of how you
Yes.
express yourself. And so it sounds like entrepreneurism is just one other way. I think for some people, they're put the money thing over here, and then art is someplace different. It doesn't all come together. But in you, it seems like it's an expression of just your creative, service-oriented heart.
It is. And, at the same time, I have a BFA in dance, and I have made very little money dancing in the last 37 years. And that's okay to me. Like there's also, I don't feel like I tried and failed. I just sort of interest kind of in the way we've been talking about like hobbies and work and protecting certain parts, is like I've always sort of protected dance from capitalism. Like, I mean, there's been times where I've been hired to choreograph a music video or be in something, but for the most part, dance has been my little quiet, like, I keep this for me. And then occasionally I'll emerge to teach a dance workshop or something, but then it's also like where I joke that I'm the fanciest, because it's like my dancing has been written about in like the New York Times and Vanity Fair and the New Yorker, but my writing hasn't been. So it's all like I just have to let the puzzle pieces kind of be where they are with that.
Because I've never seen you dance, can you describe it to me, how you dance?
Yeah, I my dance lineage is very much goes back to like Judson Church in New York City and improvisers and Yvonne Rainer, Twyla Tharp. They are all kind of the generations above me, behind me. But it's very distal ended. It's like a lot of distal initiation. So a lot of like arms and legs initiating, and a lot of spiral movement, spinning up and then spinning back down to the ground. A lot of like moving across the floor, a lot of bending. And I usually like to dance to ambient music, like Emily Sprague and Cole Police are two of my favorite musicians. And yeah, lots of hands.
I'm getting a
Yeah.
good feeling for it. Thank you.
Okay, good. Good.
Thank you. I want to end with how you began the practice of attention book, which is with a quote that you start the book with from Simone Weil. And I'll just read the first part of it. Attention taken to its highest degree is the same thing as prayer. It presupposes faith and love. This is it's a powerful quote to start a book that brings together devotion and discipline with our attention. How could attention be like prayer in your view?
Yeah, for me, praying is something I'm always doing. It's something I do every time I look out the window. When I wake up in the morning, I have a few prayers that I say. And to me, praying doesn't have to be this big gesture. It can be just really simple little sayings or mantras or questions. And it's the same as attention, because attention is whatever we are listening to, devoted to, thinking about, going towards, moving towards. And so to me, prayer and attention are sort of the same side of the same coin. So if I'm paying attention to it, that is a prayerful act, which brings me to, if I'm paying attention to Instagram all the time, that's not a very good prayer for me. I'll speak for myself, but it's like it kind of snaps me out of some of what I pay attention to, because I'm like, oh, if my attention is a prayer, I don't really like what I'm paying attention to right now. If I'm, overly consuming the news or, something that isn't quite sitting right with me. So
that's a very good point. If you're engaging, especially in an activity that is putting you into a comparing mind state, or watching something that is creating a lot of discomfort or numbness or something, asking yourself, is this the prayer that I want to be praying right now?
Yeah.
It has been so much fun to meet you.
I had so much fun too.
Cody Cook-Parrott, author of the new Sounds True book, The Practice of Attention, Cultivating Presence in a Distracted World. And if you go, where do you go to get the free quiz that will help you do the attention audit thing?
I promise you don't have to do a quiz, but you go to thepracticeofattention.com and you can put in your receipt info and you will automatically get emailed a little workbook to help you do the attention audit.
The workbook. Very good. All right. Thank you so much. Much love.
Tami.
Yep. Bye-bye.